Chapter 4. The Fog and the Fault. The weather in San Francisco is often different from other American cities because it is very near the water, between the Pacific Ocean and San Francisco Bay. The waters of the sea are very important to the temperature in the city. The weather here is never very hot or very cold. The temperature in the winter does not change a lot from the temperature in the summer. For example, in the day, it is often 15 degrees Celsius in February and 19 degrees Celsius in August. The people of San Francisco laugh about their famous summers. The weather is usually worse in the summer months of June, July, and August. At this time of year, a lot of fog comes from the Pacific Ocean, through the Golden Gate, and into the city, and you sometimes need to wear a coat in summer. The best weather is often in the spring, in April and May, or in the autumn, in September and October, when it is nice and warm with not much rain. The weather can be very different from one neighborhood to the next. You can sit in the hot sun in one area, then walk for 5 minutes to a different place, and suddenly there is fog or rain. The Pacific Ocean changes the daily weather in San Francisco. But there is one other important thing in the life of the city: the San Andreas Fault. This is a big line between two parts of the earth, and when one part hits the other, this can make big earthquakes. The San Andreas Fault does not go through San Francisco, but it goes near the city to the south. The terrible earthquake of 1906 happened because the San Andreas Fault moved. There was a very big earthquake in 1989 because of it too. It was called the Loma Prieta earthquake. More than 3,000 people lost their homes, and about 60 people died. There are often earthquakes today in the San Francisco area, but these are very little, and people cannot usually feel them. The newer houses or offices in the city are carefully built. When the earth moves, they can move too. For example, the Transamerica Pyramid, the tallest building in San Francisco, moved 30 centimeters from side to side in the 1989 earthquake, but it stayed up. Chapter 5. Travel. Travel in San Francisco is often more exciting than in other places. This is because of the many hills across the city. Some of these are very steep. Perhaps the most famous road on a steep hill in San Francisco is Lombard Street. Lombard Street is a long road with one very steep part on Russian Hill. In 1922, people changed the line of Lombard Street here, and they made the road go from side to side down the hill. This is easier for drivers, but they need to drive from one side to the other 8 times. There is no other street like this in the world, people say. San Francisco is also different from many other American cities because it does not have any very big roads near the center. In cities like Los Angeles or Miami, people usually drive from place to place. But in San Francisco, more people go by bus or walk. A walk in the city is always good. There are wonderful views across the hills, and you can go past many nice buildings. For example, in the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood, there are the beautiful old houses around Alamo Square. They are in different colors, like green, blue, orange, or yellow. Some people travel to and from the city by sea, too. Workers come across the water every day from towns like Oakland or Sausalito. When they arrive, they travel around on the Muni. The Muni is all the bus and streetcar lines in San Francisco, and the famous old cable car lines, too. Everybody knows about the cable cars. You cannot find many films about San Francisco without one. They first began in 1873. A man called Andrew Halliday had the idea for them when he saw a bad road accident. They were a very good answer to the steep, dangerous hills, and soon there were cable car lines across the city. But San Francisco lost many of its cable cars in the terrible 1906 earthquake. After this, there were more buses, and by the 1930s, a lot of people used these to travel around the city. In 1947, some of the most important men in the city wanted to close the cable car lines. Of course, the people of San Francisco became very angry because they did not want to lose them. In the end, they saved the cable cars, and today 40 of the cars move around the city on 3 different lines. Every car has a driver and a conductor. This man or woman takes the money and helps people when they travel too. This is important because some travelers stand out of the cable car on the side, and this can be very dangerous. One of the most famous conductors was Maya Angelou. She was the first African-American streetcar conductor in the city when she was only 14. She later became one of the most important writers in the United States. Her book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, is about her early years and the lives of African Americans in the 1930s. Chapter 6: The Bridge and Alcatraz. When people talk about San Francisco, they often think of the long orange-red bridge to the city, the world-famous Golden Gate Bridge. There are many wonderful photos of the bridge, often with the sun behind it or the fog half over it. A man called Charles Crocker first thought of a bridge here in 1872, but many people did not like the idea. The Golden Gate was a terrible place for a bridge, they said, because the weather was always bad and the seas were very dangerous. Later, in 1921, a bridge builder called Joseph Strauss had a good idea for a long bridge across the Golden Gate, and he talked to many important people about it. In the end, they listened to him, and work began on the bridge in January 1933. It cost more than $35 million, and hundreds of workers built it over 4 years. When it opened in April 1937, it was the longest bridge of its type in the world. It was 2.7 kilometers long, and you could walk, drive, or go by bicycle across it. The first day was very exciting. Over 200,000 men, women, and children came from all over the city and walked across the new bridge. And 50 years later, in April 1987, thousands of people went across the bridge again. This time, there were 300,000 walkers. Some of the older men and women happily remembered their first walk across it in 1937. Of course, this big bridge always needs a lot of work because the fog and seawater move around it all the time. You can find 38 workers on the bridge every day. What do? They make the bridge the famous orange-red color, and their work never stops. You can see the Golden Gate Bridge in a lot of films, too. In the James Bond film A View to a Kill, a dangerous man called Zorin chases Bond, and they have a long fight on the bridge. They move wildly from side to side, but in the end, Bond hits Zorin with his feet, and he goes down into the cold waters of the Golden Gate. When you stand on the bridge and look east across San Francisco Bay, you can see an island. It is very small, but everybody knows its name: Alcatraz. Every year, more than 1.4 million visitors visit this place. And why do they all come? they want to learn more about the story of this terrible prison island. Alcatraz Island first became an important prison in 1907. At this time, it was only a prison for soldiers. Then, in the 1930s, the U.S. government needed a place for the most dangerous people in the country. People from wild cities like Chicago or New York. Soon, they thought of Alcatraz Island. The water around the island is cold and dangerous to swim in. Nobody could escape from there, the government thought. The island became a U.S. government prison between 1934 and 1963, and over the years, 1,545 men lived there. Alcatraz became the home of famous prisoners like Al Capone from Chicago and George Machine Gun Kelly from Tennessee. Life for the prisoners on Alcatraz was not easy. The island is only 2.4 kilometers away from the city of San Francisco. From their little dark rooms, they could always hear the noises of city life from across the water. They were in prison, and they could never forget it. There are escape stories about 36 different men. Perhaps the most famous story is about Frank Morris and the two Anglin brothers, John and Clarence. At 9:30 on the evening of the 11th of June, 1962, the three prisoners got into one of the building's big air vents with the help of spoons and other things from the prison. They carefully went through the air vents and out into the dark night. The men took some old coats with them and made a raft, a type of little ship. Sometime after 10 o'clock, they began to move across the fast, dangerous waters of San Francisco Bay on their raft. And did the men escape? Some people think yes, but the prison said no. The three prisoners died in the cold water, they said. But nobody found their dead bodies, only their raft, and nobody heard from them again. You can learn all about their story in the exciting 1979 film Escape from Alcatraz with Clint Eastwood. Watch it, and perhaps you can answer the question: did they escape, or didn't they? The prison closed in 1963. Later, in 1969, hundreds of Native Americans came to Alcatraz and stayed there for 19 months. They were angry with the government about the terrible lives of their people. In the end, the government changed some of their ideas about Native Americans, and they gave the people back some of their old villages and areas. Alcatraz is now a U.S. government park, and you can visit the island all year. Most visitors come in the day, but you can go at night, too. Walk around the dark prison buildings. Look in the rooms and listen for noises. Perhaps you can hear the prisoners from long ago.